Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Well, last week we got a ton of new news regarding upcoming Star Trek shows, including Picard, Discovery, Prodigy, and Lower Decks, including the really awesome news that Lower Decks is going to be airing its second season starting on August 12th. Now, I know I'm a bit late in making these videos, but I did want to do my usual kind of breakdown of the various trailers and news that we got during the First Contact Day celebrations. So, without further ado, I'm going to do my first video here. This is a breakdown of all of the Easter eggs and interesting things we learned in the Star Trek Picard Season 2 teaser trailer. The teaser begins with a shot of the Picard family chateau as seen in Season 1 of Star Trek Picard. When we get inside later in the trailer, though, we will see that there are a number of differences from how it appeared in Season 1. It seems that the events of Season 1 have changed Picard a bit, and he's moved into a new era in his life where he's kind of opening himself to his past a little bit more. Now, interestingly, we get a voiceover over this, which starts, "The true final frontier is time." And from this and the rest of the voiceover that we get in the teaser, as well as comments made by Patrick Stewart during the actual presentation, it seems as though time travel will be playing a role in Season 2 of Picard. For good or for ill, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't really like time travel stories. For me personally, if they're done right, they can be really interesting. In particular, the voiceover on this trailer goes into things about past mistakes and things that have become history and that you never get a second chance. It really does seem as though we're going back and exploring aspects of Picard's life. Next, we enter the home and we see, first of all, this clock. Now, this clock did appear in Season 1 of Star Trek Picard as well. This shot in particular, I loved. I thought, just great cinematography, great direction here. But all of that aside, we of course are talking about time and time travel. Now, the clock, the time displayed on it is 10:04. And I was trying to think of what that might be referring to. And we do know from some of the tweets put out by the people that put together this trailer, there are a ton of Easter eggs here to be found. And I think this is one of them. 10:04 in science fiction film history is an important time because it was at precisely 10:04 p.m. on November the 5th, 1955, that lightning struck the Hill Valley Clock Tower in the film Back to the Future, enabling the doc to send Marty McFly back to the future. So I don't know for sure, this isn't confirmed, but I think this is a reference to that. Now, behind the clock is one of the biggest questions I have about this teaser, because as many have already pointed out online, this artifact seen here on this table has been seen in Star Trek before and is in fact the tablet, the Bajoran tablet from the Deep Space Nine Season 6 episode, The Reckoning. In that episode, Benjamin Sisko smashed this tablet, releasing a Prophet and a Pa-Wraith, which did battle on Deep Space Nine's Promenade. I'm very curious as to why this is here, and again, it may be feeding into the time travel aspects of the Season 2 storyline, the presumed ones, given that the Prophets are a species that exist outside of linear time. I don't think this is just a random artifact here to showcase the fact that Picard is into archaeology. I think this very specific choice to choose this Bajoran relic from that episode does very much have an impact on what happens in Season 2. So I'm really curious about this. I'd love to hear people's theories in the comments below. Will we see a tie to Deep Space Nine and the Bajoran people in Picard Season 2? Will we maybe even see Benjamin Sisko? I know that's a huge out there wild wish that is very likely not to come true, but seeing something like this in the trailer does set one's mind racing. So I'm curious to see what other people think about this. Next, we see the famous painting of the Enterprise D as seen in all 7 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation in Picard's Ready Room. Now, interestingly, this painting was not in the Chateau in Season 1. So I think, again, this is kind of showing us that Picard has gone from being a hermit, as we saw in Season 1, and kind of shutting himself away, to embracing his past and embracing that role as Jean-Luc Picard again. So I think this might be kind of symbolic of that. And besides all that, it's just a gorgeous painting. I'm really happy to see it here. Next, we get this wide shot of Picard's desk and the room in the chateau, and there are a lot of various little things here to kind of pick apart. So, starting from left to right, we see Picard's 2 volumes of his collection of the complete Shakespeare, as seen in his ready room in Star Trek The Next Generation. And interestingly, and thanks to Trek Culture for pointing this one out, this is incredible, the second volume, the one on the right-hand side, is open to the same page as when we last saw it in the film Star Trek Generations. So, interesting little touch there for sure. Just below them, in the foreground on the desk, on top of a book, we see a small figure, and I believe this is one of the small figures from the inside of the Kurlan Nasikos that Picard got from Dr. Galen in the TNG episode The Chase. Moving up to the mantle, we see a large fossil that looks somewhat like an ammonite. We've seen this in Picard's ready room on the Enterprise E in the Star Trek films before. Next to that, in the middle of the mantle, is this figure of a horse-drawn plow. This is an interesting deep cut and really cool. This figure was first seen on the mantle of the Picard family home in the TNG episode Family, the episode where Picard returns home after his ordeal with the Borg. So very deep cut reference there. Now, next to that on the mantle, it's hard to make out in this picture, and we don't really get a good shot of it in the trailer, but I've seen elsewhere online Ben Robinson sharing some details about this. It is a Promelian battlecruiser, as seen in the TNG episode Booby Trap from Season 3. Interestingly, the model they used is actually an Eaglemoss model of the Promelian battlecruiser, which I think marks the first time that an Eaglemoss model has made it on screen in Star Trek. So that's pretty cool, and a nice little callback to the fact that Picard built ships in bottles as a boy, and possibly even owning a Promelian battlecruiser, which this may be his childhood version of that ship. Below the mantle, we see the chair behind the desk. The chair is the same type as the ones seen on the Enterprise E and D, the same kind of design of chair, and may in fact be one of the chairs from the Enterprise E, or intended to be, obviously. Draped over the chair behind the headrest is the Mintakan tapestry that Picard received as a gift from the Mintakan people at the end of the Season 3 episode Who Watches the Watchers. This tapestry can be seen from that point on in TNG on the back of Picard's chair in his quarters, and in the TNG films on the back of his chair in his ready room. Now, in the deep background beneath the window on the right-hand side, we see what I think might be the main part of the Kurlan Nasikos. It's hard to tell. And next to that, a sextant, which is also something that we saw in Picard's ready room from time to time on TNG. And in front of that, in the foreground, we see a golden yellow model of the Stargazer, which looks a lot like the model that Picard had in his ready room throughout TNG. But I'll talk a little bit more on that later as we get a better shot of that model. Next is a shot of Picard's Combadge, the last Combadge that he had as an officer in Starfleet. We saw him wearing this Combadge in a flashback in Season 1 of Star Trek Picard, and he also used it in Season 1 to contact Raffi in order to get a ship to travel to find Bruce Maddox. Next, we get a shot of a pair of books. The book on the bottom is The Long Dark Tunnel by Tracy Torme. Now, The Long Dark Tunnel can be seen in Elkar's graphics in Star Trek The Next Generation, the episode The Big Goodbye, as one of the novels of Dixon Hill, the private detective that Picard is a fan of his books. Tracy Torme is listed as the author in that graphic as kind of an Easter egg there, because Tracy Torme is actually a writer and executive story editor for the first and second seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, resting on top of that book is Paradise Lost, and this, of course, has resonated throughout Star Trek history, serving as metaphor for a lot of different stories in the franchise. Definitely not something I'm going to do a deep dive into here, but Paradise Lost has had a long history with influencing Star Trek stories for sure. So here's that close-up of the Stargazer model, and we see the registry number and the fact that it is the USS Stargazer. And like I said, it looks somewhat like the model that we saw in Picard's ready room, the yellow one. However, this is a little different. The one in Picard's ready room, for whatever reason, wasn't actually the Stargazer, and we do get a shot of the registry number of that ship at one point. I think set dressing wise, it's supposed to be the Stargazer, but the registry number doesn't match, so somebody, it just, changed circumstances over the course of the series and that sort of thing. So, but all that aside, I think this model is supposed to at least be reminiscent of that model that we saw in Picard's ready room throughout TNG. Next, we get this shot of sand running backwards in an hourglass, again kind of evoking that idea of time travel and going back and fixing a mistake or something like that. I'm wondering, with the proximity of this to the focus on the Stargazer, if we will get some sort of exploration of Picard's time aboard the Stargazer and what that has kind of meant for his life. We know that that was a very important part of his life, and we've really only seen a little bit of that kind of in the TNG episode The Battle and the end of the Stargazer. But he was on that ship for over 20 years, according to Star Trek lore, so it's very possible we may see something new and interesting from that Stargazer era. Picard at this point in the voiceover says, "Time offers so many opportunities, but never second chances." And we get this shot of a deck of cards with the Queen of Hearts showing. And my immediate thought on seeing this was to remember the bit from the very first episode of Star Trek Picard, Remembrance, the dream sequence where he's playing poker with Data. And Data wins with 5 Queens of Hearts somehow. And that was my immediate thought here, was linking it back to that somehow. I remember at the time there was a lot of speculation as to what those cards meant, and nothing really seemed to come of it. Here, however, we get, of course, a repeat of that card, the Queen of Hearts. And as the rest of the cards sort of disappears, Thanos snap-esque, we're left with just the Q in the corner. And of course, John Delancey's voiceover, "The trial never ends," which is very similar to his line from the TNG finale, All Good Things, when he tells Picard that the trial never ended. We never reached a verdict. And it seems that, of course, Q will be playing a part in season 2 of Star Trek Picard, which is very welcome, and John Delancey reprising that role is very exciting. I remember some people have speculated that, the idea of Q in Star Trek Picard, it just doesn't really fit. He's too goofy and the Picard tone is too serious. I really disagree with that. I think Q is at his best when he's the more menacing Q, the more kind of big ideas Q. I'm thinking of especially his turn in All Good Things. I think there's some very poignant Q scenes there. And the fact that he's, about more in that episode than just taunting the crew and kind of playing around and joking. He's teaching Picard and humanity something important. At least that was my impression in that episode. So the idea of Q coming into this storyline, I think, is a very welcome one. I think there's some really interesting things that can be done with his character, and I'm very excited to see how that goes in season 2 of Picard. And then we close out with Q's kind of sinister laugh over the Star Trek fanfare swelling, the Star Trek Picard title, with new season coming 2022 at the bottom. So very excited. We know they are currently filming, and I'm very curious to see how this will all come together next year. Really looking forward to Picard season 2. But in the meantime, I want to hear from all of you. Are you excited about season 2 of Picard? Are you happy for Q's return, or is that something that kind of turns you off a bit? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, of course, to the Patreon supporters for all of their help in bringing these videos to you. I could not do it without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I will be back very shortly with another video, this time detailing the Lower Decks trailer and another one detailing the Discovery trailer that we got on First Contact Day. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you then. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.